Hi, I'm Richard from Love Brewing. We have a retail outlet here in Chesterfield and one in Liverpool, and hopefully you will have seen us on the internet as well. We'd like to talk to you today about the air still. This is an exciting new venture, and it's a way of making your own alcohol, your own distilled alcohol, to be able to make your own spirit. I think you need to check the legality of making your own alcohol. There is a disclaimer at the end of the video, and there is one on the website as well. So depending on where you're based, you need to look at this. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to start by making some alcohol. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a fermentation. They call it, the spirit people call it a wash. So we're going to make a wash using some special yeast, and we're going to use either 6 bags of sugar or 7 bags of glucose powder brewing sugar. The brewing sugar will produce a slightly cleaner taste to the spirit. The sugar is obviously slightly better value for money. The choice is yours as to what you do. If you're looking for maximum quality, I would strongly recommend using the glucose powder. If you're looking for value for money, then use sugar. Perhaps it might be worth trying it both ways, and you make the decision after you've tried it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 21 litres of water, and we're then going to add our sugar to it. So if you bear with me, all the equipment that we're using is beautifully clean, and in most cases we would recommend that you sterilise it as well using a recognised cleaner steriliser. One thing we would always recommend is, if you've got a bucket without graduations, measure out 21 litres and 25 litres and just mark it with a black pen on your bucket. We're just going to take the temperature of that now to make sure we're somewhere in the region of where we want to be. Yep, we're up to 30, so we're just about right for that. Now, one thing to bear in mind, we're looking for that start temperature of 30. If you find your temperature's not quite right, then just take some out with a jug, use a jug, whip some out and put some more in. You can adjust it with hot or cold to get your temperature to 30 degrees. Okay, so now we've got our temperature, we're now going to take the sugar and add the sugar. Water's at 30 degrees C. We're using glucose powder. So we've got 7 bags of glucose powder. That's 7 kilo bags that we're using, and we're just going to add that directly to the bucket. In she goes, and I will add the remaining 6, making 7 in total. So we've added 6, and here is our 7th and final bag that we're going to use. The reason that we've got 7 kilos of brewing sugar as opposed to 6 kilos of granulated sugar is that there is a percentage which is unfermentable in the brewing sugar. That's why we have to increase it by at least 10%. So we've got the 7 kilos of brewing sugar and the 6 kilos of ordinary sugar. Now, this particular yeast, the triple distilled yeast, loves to start at 25, and we'll explain in a minute why the temperature is going to drop to 25 when the sugar is added. 2 things that have happened now. Our liquid temperature has dropped from 30 to 25, which is great because this yeast we want at 25 when we get it going. The second thing that's happened is that the volume has gone from 21 litres to 25 litres with that addition of sugar. So we're now going to add our triple distilled yeast. Now, the triple distilled yeast is the only yeast that we should ever use with this air still. This yeast is so pure. It produces a wash which has no off flavours at all, or as little as possible, and it's the one that, because we're using this air still, it has to be the triple distilled. So I'm going to add the triple distilled yeast now to our bucket. In there are nutrients and absorbers. The absorbents are absorbing the off flavours that are given off. But just to help with that process as well, we've also got some carbon. Now the carbon's quite firm, so we just need to manipulate it with our hands to get it back into liquid, and that we've got no big lumps at the bottom. So just give it a good going over like this, and just get it all nicely dissolved. This is black, and it's very, very dark. And if you get it on your clothes, you're not going to be very popular. So be careful when you add this. In she goes. Now I'm just going to squeeze, make sure we've got everything out of that carbon and got it added to the bucket. So the carbon is also going to act to stop those off flavours being given off. And we're going to give that now a stir just to make sure that's nicely dissolved. And the yeast is now in solution. What we can do is we can take a hydrometer reading by dropping this into the bucket. This is quite useful. When you take a hydrometer reading, you've got a reference point to what the gravity of the liquid is, and this will measure the gravity. The higher the gravity, the more potential alcohol we have of getting out of this. What we always recommend is give it a stir, drop the hydrometer in, take a note of the reading. Give it another stir, drop it in again. If it's showing the same reading, you know you've done a good mixing job. If it keeps going higher and higher because you've not mixed it properly, then keep repeating the process until you get two readings the same on your hydrometer. So take a hydrometer reading and make a note of that. What we're now going to do is we're going to put the bucket lid on, put that into place there, nice and tight, and we're going to add an airlock to it. The airlock we're going to just half fill with water, so we'll just put the tap on there to get some water to come through, and as you can see the water is sitting in the top of the airlock there, half filled, with the red cap going on to stop it from squirting all over the place. That goes into place there, and we can now leave this bucket in a temperature between 20 and 25. That's the ideal fermenting temperature for this particular yeast and this particular product. It's going to take about 7 days to do the fermentation. Now don't panic if it's a bit longer. What we're looking for is that hydrometer that we've just shown you. When that hydrometer has the same reading for 2 days, then the fermentation is finished. Normally you'll get bubbles coming through the airlock as well, which gives you a gauge that fermentation is taking place. If you don't get bubbles, don't panic, always use your hydrometer to see whether it's falling. And as long as that hydrometer is going further and further into the liquid, so it's dropping, you know your fermentation is taking place. And we're looking for a finishing gravity of between 980 and 990. So that's at the very bottom end of this particular hydrometer. Reading of 980 to 990. So we're looking for the fermentation to show the same reading for 2 days. Fermentation is done, and also we've probably not got any bubbles coming through the airlock. That's, as I say, going to take about 7 days. If the temperature is slightly cooler, then obviously it will take slightly longer for that fermentation to take place. So it could take up to 12 days. If it's warmer, it might take slightly less time. But ideally, we're looking for 7-day fermentation. And for maximum quality, we're always better having this slightly cooler than slightly warmer. So don't think heat is good. In fact, cool is good, but it will take a little bit longer for the fermentation to take place. So what we're doing in the bucket is we're doing an alcohol wash. We're trying to get lots of alcohol in there. And when the fermentation's finished, which we'll come on to shortly, we'll have about 14% alcohol in that bucket. Great. So we've had 7 days of fermentation in the bucket. We're now going to check the hydrometer reading. So we're just going to drop that in, and what we do with the hydrometer, just give it a little spin, and that makes sure there are no bubbles stuck to it, and then we're going to read across the liquid line of the actual fermentation. and that gravity should be in the region of 990 to 980. So I'm just looking at this, and we have, yeah, we're about 985. So we're going to continue with this. I have to say, I did check it yesterday as well, and it was showing the same sort of reading. So yeah, we're ready to go to the next step. All right, so what we've got to remember is that the yeast, which has done the job of converting all that sugar to alcohol, will give off CO2, and we need to get rid of that CO2 because it'll be present in the liquid, and that's going to cause problems twofold when we come to distill and also when we come to add the finings. So what we need to do now is, for the next, well, it might be a couple of days, we need to get rid of all that carbon dioxide, and we need to use something like a paddle or a degassing stick that we can put into the bucket and help to actually beat all the liquids, all the gases out of the liquid. So we just need to keep mixing, getting rid of all those gases. Don't worry about the sediment at the bottom, that will all get disturbed and it will be like a black mess in here. So we're going to repeat that process, this process here of mixing and getting rid. You'll see all the bubbles are starting to come to the top of the surface, and there's a bit of foam created on the top as we do it. Just keep doing it. If we can repeat this 3 or 4 times a day for about 3 or 4 minutes, that's brilliant. You'll probably find you've done it in a day. You'll know when you're finished because the foam won't be so predominant. There'll be less of it actually on the surface. So we need to repeat that maybe for the next 2 days, but all being well, we can get it done within 24 hours. Now, at the same time as doing this, we need to look at the clearing process. So once we've done the degassing, we can then add the finings. Now the finings, the turbo clear. These are a 2-part fining, part A and part B. One is a positive charge, one is a negative charge. Now with the finings, they are vicious. They really will take all the rubbish out of there within 12 to 24 hours. They're vicious. There's loads of them and they're really strong. Now with wine and beer, when we add finings, we need to think of finings as the enemy, because finings will strip out flavour, colour, body, bouquet, all the things that we want to maintain in our wine and beer. But in our spirit making, as we've said, we're trying to create this really neutral wash. We want alcoholic water there really. So we can use really vicious finings which are going to strip everything out in that particular bucket. And as I say, that's why we'll end up with something within 12 to 24 hours that's beautifully clear. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add part A. Part A goes into the bucket, and that we need to leave a couple of hours before we add part B. So in part A we'll go now. We're going to snip across the corner here, and we've got part A that we're going to add to the bucket. So in she goes, and I'm going to stir that. That needs a good stirring in. So we're going to stir that in nicely. And then we're going to come back in a couple of hours and we're going to add part B. So we'll put the lid back on and I'll see you shortly. Right, so we're back again, and we're now just going to take the lid off and we're going to add part B. So again, cutting across the corner of the sachet, like so. This is the chitosan that's going in now, and I'm adding that to the bucket. And all I'm going to do now is gently fold that in. I don't want a vigorous stir now, just a gentle fold. So in she goes. And we're now going to put the bucket lid back on. And we're going to leave this now for, well, let's say up to 24 hours. It might come through quicker. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put it there on the work surface so that we can have it at a height that allows us to do the siphoning. What we're going to do is we're going to end up with lovely clear liquid with a thick sediment at the bottom, a thick black sediment, but all the liquid at the top will be lovely and clear. And we're going to use a siphon to siphon this from this bucket into the one that we're going to have on the floor. And that way, in the bottom bucket, we'll have about 24 litres of lovely clear liquid. So we'll come back and have another go tomorrow. Okay, so we've now got 25 litres in the bucket. We've got the thick black sediment at the bottom, and we need to siphon the clear liquid off the sediment into our bottom bucket. To do that, we're using a siphon. Now the siphon has two features. One, it has an anti-sediment trap, so the liquid comes over the top and this doesn't go down to the bottom of the bucket. It will sit on the bottom of the bucket, but it won't draw liquid from there. So if this drops into the sediment, it's not a problem. The other thing that we've got on the sediment, on the siphon, is we have an extendable tube with a bucket clip on. Now we reckon the bucket clips are really good when you're siphoning, whichever type of siphon you use, because it will allow you to keep two hands free. And then on this particular one we have a tap. There are all sorts of different types of siphons available on the market. This one is when it goes into the bucket, we suck and make sure that the sucking is below the bottom of the liquid on the actual siphon. There's one called an auto siphon or a simple siphon that just pumps up and down. That again, great siphon. That one you don't need to suck. But again, always try and get a bucket clip with it because it does allow you to keep your two hands free. So with this particular one, we're going to put the bucket clip into place. We're going to drop the tube into the bottom of the bucket, and then we're just going to go and let it go. Once we've done that, we'll come back because we'll then end up with some lovely clear liquid. I'm just going to lift this up here so it's on the side here. This, it's like alcoholic water. 14% alcohol. There's really no taste to it at all. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that liquid and we're going to put it into our air still. Now the liquid, we need 4 litres at a time to go into the air still. So I'm going to move this out of the way and I'm going to get hold of the air still now and show you how the air still operates. Now this is the air still. Basically it's a very inefficient pot still, but it's incredibly convenient. So as long as we abide by the principle of making sure that the wash we use for this particular machine produces a really clean base, we'll end up with super quality alcohol. That's why you must only use the triple distilled yeast. Don't try using any other yeast, it will produce far too many off flavours. The machine, as I say, it's a lovely little pot still, incredibly convenient. What we're going to do is we're going to take 4 litres of that 14% wash and we're going to put it in this air still. Now in the air still, you might not be able to see this, but we have just there a indentation on the inside of this beautiful stainless steel keg, and that 4 litre indentation is what we're going to fill up to into this particular machine. So our lovely clear wash here is going in. There we are. We're on our 4 litre mark. Now if your wash is not 100% clear, don't go to a state of panic. If there's a slight greyness to it, we can get around that. Once it runs through the air still, you'll actually find it's fine and it will come out lovely and clear. So we've now put our 4 litres in. We're now going to add our ceramic saddles, which come with the machine. In they go. And we're also going to add 3 capfuls of distiller's conditioning. And I'm going to explain what those 2 things do and the reason why we're going to add them. And we're going to put the lid on. And we can then connect up. So the top is now connected to the bottom and our mains is going inside as well. And we switch on. You can hear the fan is starting to run in the top of the still. So that is now starting to work. And as we're waiting for that to warm up, I want to just explain a few things to you. Distiller's conditioning, it's basically an anti-foaming agent and it will stop foaming. The ceramic saddles are designed to break up the bubbles on the base of the machine. Have you ever made milk or put milk into a pan to make a nice hot drink? If you do, all the bubbles that sometimes form on the base of the pan can join together and create like a little mini explosion. It pops like that. The same can happen with the air still, and the lid will start to move away. And obviously with having the alcohol in it, that is something that we don't want to happen. So we add the ceramic saddles to prevent that, and the anti-foaming agent to stop it from foaming and actually causing the lid again to pop off. Purely for safety measures, they should be added. Okay, right, so inside the machine we've got our 14% alcohol. What's going to happen? We're now heating up, and we're going to heat up to 78 to 82. And that's why it's really important to make sure this particular machine is one that is designed for alcohol distillation. As well as being able to do the other things, it is set to a temperature of between 78 and 82. At that point, what will happen is the alcohol will come away from the water in a vapor format, and it will come into the top of the machine. The vapors will then start to drift up into the top, into a coil which is in the top of the machine, and that fan that you can now hear will chill the vapors back down. When they get chilled, they'll turn back into liquid and they'll start to drip through our little nozzle. That's how distillation works. Water obviously boils at 100. Our alcohol is boiling at 78 to 82. This is how we get a separation, and this is how we get the alcohol out of the liquid that we've got in the machine. So with this particular machine, we're going to collect about 800 mils of alcohol. We've got a collecting chamber here, which comes with it. And the collecting chamber is a 3-part, which again, I'll move on to in a minute. But this moment in time, I've got a container here, which I'm just going to put underneath there to actually collect the drips. The first hour, the machine will heat up, and it will then get up to temperature. At the end of the first hour, we will start to see dripping coming through here into our collecting chamber. And at the end of the second hour, we will have collected about 800 mils of 60% alcohol. Okay, so that's quite strong. And I think it's important to say we don't really want to collect any more than 800 mils. Some people like to only collect 700, some people will go up to 800. I personally will collect 800. So we collect 800 mils, we then need to dilute that 50% with water. So our 800 mils are now going to be increased to 1200 mils. We've reduced the alcohol strength from 60% down to 40%. Right, at 40%, we can now consider it to be vodka. What we've got to do though is we've got one final little process to do. We need to run it through our black carbon cartridge. Now, one thing to remember, alcohol will not be treated successfully from carbon unless it's less than 50%. So it's no good running this 60% alcohol through a carbon cartridge. We have to collect it first and then dilute it down. The carbon cartridge that we run the alcohol through should be used once. So each time you put 1.2 litres of alcohol through it, you should then dispense with it and use another one. These are just designed, as I said before, to take out the remaining impurities from the alcohol. Soak them 20 minutes in hot water before you start, and then just run your alcohol through them. So we're going to dilute it down, and this is our carbon cartridge here. The black carbon cartridge goes on the base of this collecting chamber. This needs to be soaked in hot water for about 20 minutes before we start. That releases some of the pores and allows the alcohol to start to come through. And that will quite simply sit in this particular container here. And we can let the liquid run through into this bottom chamber. So we've collected it in here, we're diluting it, we're adding it, and it's going to come down into the collecting chamber. We've a nice little lid that sits on the top of it as well. So depending on how long it takes for the alcohol to run through the carbon, we don't need to worry about any infections or anything like that. Not that we'd get it at that strength of alcohol. So we're going to let the liquid run through there. That carbon cartridge can take up to, well, anything between 4 and 8 hours for it to run through. Don't worry if it takes longer. The longer it takes, the more efficient it is being and the more impurities it takes out. So time is not an element. Just put it in there, put the lid on, go to bed. When you get up in the morning, should all be done. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned is some people will think that it's necessary to remove the first 50 or 100 mils of alcohol that comes through there. If you read any books or anything on alcohol distillation, everybody will tell you to remove the first 50 to 100 mil. With this particular machine, and provided you've used the triple distilled yeast, the carbon and the clear that we've shown you at the start, you've absolutely no need whatsoever to remove any of those. It's called heads. You don't need to worry about the heads with this particular machine and that. There is a minute amount of methanol in this particular thing, and methanol is the thing that people worry about. But you've probably got 1/10 of the methanol in that you would find in a bottle of commercial whiskey. What we recommend as well is, don't forget, you've now got 24 litres of totally clear alcohol which we're putting in this machine. Each time it goes in the machine, we're going to take 4 litres. So each time we've got 6 times 4 litres going in that machine from our 24 litre bucket of lovely clear alcohol. Each time we're getting 800 mils diluted down to 40% alcohol. We're going to go from 800 mils to 1200 mils. Strength 60 down to 40. So we've got 1.2 litres. So we're going to get 6 times 1.2 litres of alcohol from a 25 litre bucket. We're going to get 7.2 litres of 40% alcohol. You're getting roughly 10 bottles of vodka every time you do a wash. And what we want to talk about now is what we're going to do with that vodka. But before I do that, I would just like to say, I think it's quite important that you run it through as quickly as you can. So you've got that bucket, you've got 6 passes to go through the machine. Try and get that through in a couple of days. You don't want the alcohol hanging around. At 14%, it is likely to get infections. Not immediately, but it will pick up infections. So you leave it for a few weeks, you're going to have a bit of a problem with infections. Try and get it done within a few days. That way you keep your alcohol pure. You don't need to worry about whether you're going to do your carbon treatment or whether you're going to add flavouring to it, because you can keep the alcohol either at 60% or at 40%, preferably in glass, and it will last for a very, very long time. You can then flavour it as and when you want to at whatever stage. So we'll come on to the flavourings now, and we'll talk to you about the flavourings. But just to recap, we're looking at 4 litres in the machine. We collect 800 mils at 60%. That takes about 2 hours from start to finish. Dead useful as well if you've got a time clock. Put it on a time clock or set your phone to make sure it bleeps at you at the end of 2 hours. Collect it. We've then got 800 mils of 60% alcohol. Dilute it 50% with water. The 800 mils becomes 1200 mils. We're going to run it through the carbon cartridge. Final process. Once that's done, we can then add our flavourings, and we're going to talk about the flavourings now. We've now got roughly 7 litres of alcohol, and we've got to deal with that. Now that's 7 litres of alcohol. Think in terms of it being vodka. If it's vodka, then you might want to drink it as it is. You might also want to add a flavouring, because we actually do a vodka flavouring to it. So you might want to add a flavouring, but the choice is yours. Now, if we're just having it as straight vodka, it's going to cost you about 80-90 pence here in the UK to make that. Once you add your flavouring, you're going to take the cost up to around £2.40 a bottle. So we're not looking at crown jewels for this particular product. We're looking at real good value for money and great fun at doing it as well. So let's look at some of the options that we've got on the flavourings. The most popular range that we do is a range called Classic. Now these are sachets that will make up things like Tennessee Bourbon, which is our version of a Jack Daniels, a whiskey, a single malt whiskey, a white rum like a Bacardi. We've got a spiced rum, we've got a dark rum, gin, different types of bourbons, whiskies, a blue jewel which is very similar to a Bombay Sapphire, a brandy. We've got many more than the ones that I've just shown you there. But each of those will make just over a litre. They are our top quality flavourings. They're the Rolls Royce of flavourings. They're super. We've also got the top shelf. Now the top shelf do a range of bottles, again for spirits. And these are like so. Each of these bottles will do 3 times 75 cl bottles. So you've got things like a cherry bourbon, French brandy, citrus vodka, all sorts of different spirit flavourings. And these ones work out at around £1.30, £1.40 a bottle for the flavouring. So obviously each of them will do 3 bottles. So you're looking at around £4 for those flavourings. They will be added neat. We also have a range of Snatches. So we've got things like peach, pear, blackberry. And with each of these, it will tell you on the back of the bottle how much to add. So with this particular one, it will say take 650 mils of alcohol at 40%. Add the flavouring, add the base. Each of them come with their own base and they're colour coordinated to match the actual bottles so that you don't get it wrong. And in there is sugars and thickening agents. So you'll add those to the alcohol and the flavouring, and we will then top up to 1.125 litres with plain water. So each of these is going to make you 1.125 litres. That's 1 full bottle and 1 half-size bottle. So you get half-size bottle to try and a full-size bottle to put away for safekeeping. So those are the Snatches. We also do a range of liqueurs, and with the liqueurs, things like coconut rum, cherry brandy, amaretto, we do all sorts of different ones. And again, with these, it will tell you on the back how much alcohol to take, and the alcohol amounts will vary, each one, and they will also tell you whether to add a base A, B or C. So in here, we have the different types of bases that we do. Each of them have different amounts and will produce different levels of sweetness in the particular liqueur. They are all designed to match commercial equivalents. So the strength of them will come out similar to a commercial. And again, we'll make 1.125 litres. So we're topping up with water to 1.125 litres. And the final ones that we do in this range are a range of cream liqueurs. And the cream liqueurs are slightly different. We take the cream, we add 250 mils of hot water to it, mix it up. We then take the amount of alcohol that it tells us on the back of the bottle. We'll add the cream base, which has already been activated with the 250 mils of hot water. And again, we'll top it up to 1.125 litres with some water and make sure it's well stirred. We would also recommend that the creams are kept in the fridge. We have a range of icon liqueurs as well. The icon liqueur is slightly different. We will pour this into a bottle, a 75 ml bottle, sorry, a 75 cl bottle, and we'll top up with vodka. Shake it and it's ready to go. These are the simplest ones that we do and produce some excellent results as well. And finally, we have a range of vodka flavourings. So we do things like vanilla, lemon, peach, raspberry, different types of flavourings in vodka, and these are just designed to add a very, very gentle flavouring to the vodka and to make them sort of very similar to some of the commercial ones that are available. It's not a heavy flavouring, it's quite a sensitive, gentle flavouring, particularly good and very, very popular. So you've got all the different types of flavourings. We're always bringing new ones out. We're always sort of looking at the range. If a commercial one becomes available, like the cherry bourbon or the honey bourbon, we'll try and bring out an equivalent one as quickly as we can. So keep your eye on that. That's always changing. Okay, I think you've had a pretty good recap now, or a pretty good look at the whole still spirits range, the stills. We also do bigger stills, so please look at those. We do things like a T500, we do a lembic pot still. So there are various other stills available on the market, but we love the air still. It's really simple, dead easy to use, and great value for money.